I'm a lone wolf.
Right. Okay, coming up in about 8 minutes, people. So if you're watching an archive version, you might want to fast forward to the top of the show. 8 minutes. Caroline Stevens coming on tonight. Having a bit of a chat about what's going on. And what have you. So yeah, if you're watching an archive version, you might want to fast forward about 7-8 minutes to the top of the show. Let's have a good one. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, cool. Share people. God bless you. Thank you.
I'm creeping through the shadows in the corners of your mind. I go where the wind blows. I run but I don't hide. I hear the call of the wild, whispering the name. No, I can't be tamed. My heart belongs to the night. I'm alone, I'm a lone wolf.
Really?
I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf.
I'm sorry. I couldn't put up with that. It's all copyright free, Facebook. Copyright free, Facebook. Oh. Hey Caroline, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
It just rang once and then you rang off, so I thought I'd give you a ring back.
Well, I realised it's so early, I thought I'd give you a few minutes respite.
That's good.
Yeah, lovely. Oh, look, I'll embed your video, thank you. About 5 minutes, people. Oh no, this bloke, he needs to cheer up, this bloke. I'll give him a credit though. Floating your boat, Chris Linton. Holding on, he's holding on to Brexit.
Living in the same routine.
Oh,
like
blimey.
the seasons, I'm on repeat.
Come on.
It's a long way down.
Yeah. Long way to Brexit, I tell you that.
Trying not to follow suit. Don't like the color, I'll change the shade.
Don't like your suit. Don't like the colour of your suit.
I'm not afraid of it.
Go on, tell us.
I know
I haven't got a clue, mate.
holding on to this. Holding on. know I'm
Well, go on, tell us, for goodness sake, spill the beans, man.
holding on.
There we go.
Don't let me repeat it. Don't let me repeat it.
He knows a lot, he doesn't say much.
Fast forward a year or two.
Yeah, 2.5. Try 2.5.
But so can you. So can you. For too long about the mistakes. While I resent, I learned to hate. Forgot your name. Fear the struggle to follow on. Need to focus to prove you're wrong. I'm not wrong. I know
Well,
I'm
you better tell us, you've only got 2 minutes.
holding on to this. Holding on. I know I'm. Oh, I know I'm.
I'll tell you, it's like listening to Jeremy Corbyn, isn't it?
Holding on. Don't
Oh,
let
here we
me
go.
repeat it. Don't let me repeat it.
Good Lord, it sounds like Hillary Clinton. Holding on. Oh, crying out loud. 10 seconds, for goodness sake. Ridiculous song. Right. Oh, blimey, I run out of track. Hey, folks. Good evening, good people. Welcome to the Daily Brexit. Holding democracy to account, fighting for self-determination and exposing plutocracy. I'm Olly Connelly. Thanks for turning up. And now, fantasy politics. Democracy trashed, mandates ignored. Is party politics beyond repair? It's kind of a rhetorical question, yeah. Political commentator Caroline Stevens discusses fakes, egos, and psychos. Kind of suspect we'll be discussing 5G too. You can join in too, taking your calls on Discord on gov.ly/rant. And see you in the comments. Please help the show, paypal.me/Brexit. If you can afford it, please. Big cheers. Thank you. Please share the thing, like the page, whatever you do, all that. Let folks know we're talking, we're thinking, we're watching. We are active. Right. That. Oh, yeah. Oh, look at that. Okay, that's enough of that. Caroline Stevens, good evening. How are you, my dear?
Good evening. Thank you for having me back on your show. It seems such a long time ago since we last spoke.
It has been a while. It has. Thank you very much indeed for popping back on. There's so much to talk about. And, but I don't know. I mean, it's been a while since you've been on the show, but it feels as though nothing really has happened. I mean, only...
nothing in the political scene, but everything behind the curtains. I've been doing lots of interviews, haven't I? From, politicians to police crime commissioners to people, retired veterans, to mums who've had their children taken from them by the state. It's been a busy old time, and it's been a great way of getting their stories out, but also collating information and having the finger on the pulse, as they say.
I know you've been busy, and we're going to go through a lot of that, I hope. Hold on a sec. Oh, that was some strange echo going on there. Right, okay. So let's just go through a few of the stories going on today, and I'd be fascinated to hear your take on these as well, please, Caroline. West Monster, and everybody, I guess, by now pretty much, is leading on counter-terror police investigating explosive devices in London. They were confirmed as explosive devices, apparently. The Met's counter-terror police are launching an investigation after a number of suspicious packages were found around London. The 3 packages, A4-sized white postal bags containing yellow jiffy bags, have been assessed by specialist officers to 3 transport hubs, apparently, Caroline. But just no surprise at all.
Look, we live in a time where you've got MPs shredding important documents in council parks, so nothing surprises me.
Okay, all right.
Do you remember that?
No, I don't. No, give me the reference, please.
It was Oliver Letwin. He was found
Really?
throwing files, discarding them in the council car park. No, the council park even. Yes.
Right.
So I mean, if the MPs can get away with doing things like that,
were they
just packages.
Maybe they were his reasons to stay in the EU.
Parcel.
Maybe they were his reasons to stay in the EU, Caroline. I don't know. Oliver Letwin, Tory Wet.
Well, Letwin was supposed to be the MP that was supposed to have produced a blueprint for us if we voted to leave the EU, but they guessed we weren't going to vote to leave the EU. So basically, it was jobs for the boys for a period of time, because I don't think he did anything.
Incredible.
But please, Oliver Letwin, please ring the show and let's have your take on it. Let's not malign any MPs.
Very welcome, Mr. Letwin. Come on in and let's have a laugh. Breitbart, Macron attacks Brexit, calls for European federalism in pre-election war cry. Globalist French President Emmanuel Macron has made a direct address to the over 500 million people who live in the European Union, calling on them to support his vision of a more centralized and powerful project European Union, which he believes could even entice the United Kingdom into cancelling Brexit. Is he doing the EU more harm than good here, Caroline, out of interest?
Delusional politics at its worst, isn't it? I mean, who's supposed to be leading here? It's supposed to be the people that vote these people in. But of course, we know that the political party system is rigged. Ghost votes are included on an industrial scale. And that also not just happened in the UK from the general election of 2015, but it also happened in France to keep Marine Le Pen out. So they basically rig the ballot box. So that's why I find that I believe that party politics is going to be a thing of the past.
How much do you think they are scared about May and the Euro elections?
You mean the EU scared about May?
Sorry,
No,
not Theresa May. They're not scared about her, are they? No. The EU Parliament elections. How scared do you think they are about the makeup of the new assembly?
Well, when I stood for UKIP, we always said that we could never, ever have any impact in the EU Parliament. The only reason for electing the MEPs was to provide eyes and ears for the people back home. And that hasn't always been entirely successful, has it? So, I mean, a third of the MEPs are directly in the pockets of George Soros. So, they don't make the rules, do they? I mean, the elections, it's just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And the Titanic will not.
It does, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, completely. That's a great analogy. That's what it looks like.
But it's not going to sink yet. That's the problem we've got now, Ollie, because we're going on this glide path to the May elections, and we're still going to be in the EU, whether we're in a transition period or not. We're still going to be in there. So we'll have the taxation without representation. Not that it actually made much difference anyway, because, as I say, we couldn't alter it with 8% of the votes. And we were, the EU Parliament actually gets lobbied by the big boys. And they write all the rules, and we just accept them. And so what's going to happen by May, June? We're going to have this taxation coming from Brussels by the looks. That's what it's on the cards. So all the people who are taxpayers here are going to be taxed by Brussels. I don't know whether that's going to be in addition or instead of our national taxation system.
Tell me about that, actually, then, because I'm not up to speed with what's going on there. How close are we to being taxed directly by the EU?
Pretty close. It's the date is approximately June of this year. So there was an article in The Independent in January, which I can get to you after the show, and then you can maybe share it with the people, your listeners.
What's happening there then? What legislation have they passed in the EU Parliament that they've decided that they can tax EU? Go on.
3 weeks ago, I took to doing a live feed on Facebook. I thought, well, who's talking about the Lisbon Treaty? And nobody, not one politician was talking about the Lisbon. In fact, nobody was talking about the Lisbon Treaty. So the Lisbon Treaty was the treaty we signed, Miliband signed, instead of Gordon Brown in 2007 in December, and it came into force in 2009. And there are various points.
It's the one that the Irish and the French voted against, and then they changed it, rewrote it slightly, and then put it out again, didn't they?
That's right. The French and the was it the Dutch? You said.
The Irish. Yes, I thought it was the Irish.
99% the same there. The Constitution and the Lisbon Treaty, the EU Constitution, it was 99% identical.
Yes.
So we signed it. We came into force in 2009. And in actual fact, I went to a Bruges Group event last Wednesday, and I quizzed John Mills, the donor of Labour Leave, the major donor from JML.
Yep.
He's a big major donor of the Labour Party as well. And I asked him in front of, 200 people, I said, John, have you read the Lisbon Treaty? And the room went quiet. And he said, yes. And I said, well, I guess you'll realise that the longer we are staying in the EU, you'll know that we'll be giving away our military to Brussels. We'll be joining the euro, etc., etc. And he said, yes, I'm aware of that. So, yes, this is very, very real. And despite the fact that when I did my live feed, I had about 18,000 views in a matter of about a week. There were people from the Remain side saying it was a load of rubbish, but it's not a load of rubbish. I've even got a friend of mine's actually got the book. It's about an inch thick on the signing of the Lisbon Treaty. So we've got changes in rules that started in 2017, which were actually after we voted to leave. So you can see that basically all the government's been doing is kicking the can into the long grass. So the longer and longer they, sort of not implement what we voted for on the 23rd of June, the harder it becomes to extricate ourselves. And in actual fact, a year ago, one of the MPs, the Brexit MPs, did squeal and say that Brexit department weren't actually preparing for Brexit. So when we're talking about these interviews that I've been doing, I've recently interviewed a guy called Alan Dransfield, and I hope he's listening tonight. And he's known as the vexatious king of England and Scotland, because Tony Blair gave us this Freedom of Information Act, which was the worst thing that he ever did. That's what he says. It's the worst thing he ever did.
From their point of view, you mean?
So have you ever used the Freedom of Information?
You mean from the point of view of the globalists, not from the point of view of...
Well, if you've got, say, several questions you want to ask the police, the councils, public bodies, you can put in a Freedom of Information request. But because they don't actually want to share information about what they're up to, because of this, Alan Dransfield, in 2013, else 2015, his case went through the courts, and they now are allowed to come back when you've asked for a request, and they actually stamp over it. This request is vexatious, and we're not going to answer your questions. So basically, they're shutting down any form of communication where we can keep any scrutiny on the government. And the worst department for vexatious claims is the Brexit department, or DEXU, in Whitehall. They're the department which is producing the most vexatious cases. So basically, we cannot scrutinise what Whitehall's doing at all.
Blimey, it's okay. We've already the Lisbon Treaty, or should we go more into this line of questioning about what's going on with covering up Brexit and what have you? It's just, where do you go? We will probably come back to at least certainly the Lisbon Treaty. Just a couple of other stories going on. Westminster again. May urged to whip MPs in favour of a no-deal Brexit. Prime Minister Theresa May has been urged to whip Conservative MPs in favour of a WTO no-deal Brexit. The vote on such
Olly,
an outcome...
can I just interrupt on that?
One sec.
Okay.
The vote on such an outcome is due to take place if May's deal gets rejected a second time. If MPs vote for no deal, the UK is due to leave on the 29th of March and become a fully independent country outside of EU control. But if MPs vote no deal down, it will destroy the UK's hand in negotiations with the European Union. I mean, it's just so obvious, Caroline, isn't it?
Well, look, Olly, the deals have been written. They're being done behind the closed doors. You know, what isn't included in this withdrawal agreement? They're not talking about the military. When you remember that at the beginning of January, and lots of people were filling in lots of petitions about leave the EU now. And those e-petitions, actually, some of them actually got debated in Parliament.
Yeah.
Because there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee, even if you got 100,000 signatures, that they will be debated.
One of them got 340,000.
Yeah.
One of them, 340,000 signatures. That's, I reckon, more than marched in that losers vote march thing. Yeah, in my opinion. But Caroline, carry on, please.
So basically, now I've lost this is what happens, you see, when you get to our age, Olly, you lose your train of thought, you know. And what happened was people were sending me the government's response because they debated it, and then they have to respond back to you having signed the petition in the first place.
Yes.
And the government actually said in the middle of January they had no intention of leaving on a no-deal basis. So, as I say, I was at the Bruges Group event last Wednesday, and I put Owen Patterson on the spot and said, well, hang on, you said you were good. He was going on about the no deal and how he was classed as racist and how he was classed as far right, which is really laughable. And it's just a distraction, you see. And I said, no. I said, no, the e-petitions are coming back. The government has no intention of leaving with no deal. And he was like, he was floored because he did not have a response to me. And he said, well, right, you've got to write to you, MP. I said, Why would I write to my MP? I said, you must have seen the newspaper statistics a couple of weeks ago that 81% of correspondence that goes to the MPs is not answered. Why would I waste now my energy? And it still amazes me how, I give them credit. These Brexiteers are sending e-petitions round still. And I just think, why use your great energy? Why not get the book, William Blackstone's book, and read up on where we should be, what rules we should actually be adhering to? Because I think we need to upskill. I think we need to educate ourselves on, who is supposed to hold these positions in our parliament, and who is supposed to be able to buy land in this country. Why is it that our government keeps rewriting the rules? There's no democracy here, Ollie.
No, absolutely.
He's
PJ
supposed
Tansley
to hold these positions in our...
Sorry, that was me. PJ Tansley, I'm asking about the signature... Oh, okay, sorry, that's within the comments there. Just take a few comments here. PJ Tansley's... Okay, ask Caroline about Lisbon Treaty signing. Demand proof of who, when, where, and how. Show me the signatures. Has anyone seen it? Well, was it not the case that Gordon Brown didn't sign it? Didn't he send somebody else to sign it instead?
It was supposed to be Miliband. Miliband was supposed to sign it. And a lot of these treaties are never actually signed by the Prime Minister. They're actually signed by somebody else. It's like the UN Migration Pact. I don't believe that Theresa May signed that. And that's another point, Ollie, because, you talk about Brexit, and a lot of people... voted for Brexit because they wanted to take back control. Yeah, they wanted to, the sovereignty.
And then she goes and signs the UN Migration Compact.
But of course, we've got the UN Migration Pact. So how does that fit? That's why the Brexit situation is just smokescreen and mirrors.
There was no news about it.
We will never be free.
Did you see any news? Any headline news? Did you see a single headline story? Maybe buried in the back pages somewhere a few days after it happened or something. But apart from that, did you see any proper news coverage about that UN Migration Compact alleged signing?
No, absolutely not. No.
Only afterwards, no?
Ollie, I subscribe to the EU, an EU website. I think it's something like EU Observer. And I got details last week that the EU had signed a pact with countries further away, and on the grounds of greater security and economic growth. So you're going to have more and more countries with their people moving into the EU. That's what they mean by security. You've got to read the opposite to what they actually say. It's going to be greater insecurity, not security. So you can see the Kudnov-Kalergi plan coming into fruition. You've got everybody's Agenda 2021 is now happening now. If you go on the M27, the M1, you've got all these motorways in the UK now. Well, I don't know if it's like this in Spain, but we've got all the main motorways being upgraded to smart motorways. So you're going to have every 100 yards or so, you're going to have a little beacon, a little camera. And if you go above 72 miles an hour between 100 yards and the next 100 yards, you're going to get faced with a fine. Because if they can't price you out of your car by selling, with the petrol costs and the insurance costs and the carbon costs, etc., then they're going to basically force you out of your car by giving you points. And inevitably, you'll eventually lose your license. So it's not easy to keep within 72 continuously for tens of miles, is it?
Do you think maybe that's all a ploy to get us to buy automated cars? And this is all a precursor, a bit like diesel. That was a big con, wasn't it? The government told everybody to go and buy diesel cars, and if you stick with your petrol, we're going to charge you way more on petrol, etc., which they did. And people went over to diesel, and then, guess what? Actually, it was all a big con. And is that not the case maybe with this as well? It's a way to get people to buy a load of cars again, which after their home is the second most expensive purchase that people could ever afford.
Well, the plans are that by 2030, 2032, the EU wants us all out of our cars, full stop. No cars. So all this bit about our car production being relocated to another country. So these car production plants are going to go elsewhere regardless of Brexit. And, the people, the Chinese can still drive around in their cars, but we will be forced not to be driving our cars. How do we get to work? We all don't live in London. Most people do not live in London. And we don't. I mean, the tube. Have you ever been on the tube recently? You're sniffing somebody's armpits all the time now. Whatever time of day you're traveling on those tubes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, take a few more comments. Thomas White says, PJ, if you look on YouTube and put in the signing of the Lisbon Treaty, you will even see who is doing the signing. And I think Gordon Brown afterwards said something along the lines, and somebody reminded me in the comment, thank you, I don't know who wrote it, but that Gordon Brown said that he'd signed it, having not read it. The bottom line, is it not, is that we are being railroaded, as is the case very much shown by that story with Theresa May now having to be reminded that she should have some kind of a negotiation tactic with the EU, at least to have any sense of credibility. The fact that she's willing to give that up, surely that is like saying to the British people, this is not a serious negotiation. Is it not just absolutely? There's no way that these people can be that stupid. Therefore, they must be complicit and malfeasant and going against the interests of the British people. There is no other feasible explanation for what this government's doing in the way they're handling these negotiations with Brussels, no?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't any real negotiations. She's just taking the orders from on high. I mean, we are? It's got a puppet. We've got a puppet government, haven't we? We've got puppets in there in the House of Commons. We've also got mainly puppets in the House of Lords as well. I mean, when the barons got together in 2001 and petitioned the Queen, that was the time when a lot of the hereditary barons
that didn't do any good, though.
Well, they had to make a choice. A lot of them had to go. They were basically kicked out of the House of Lords. The truth be known, a lot of people don't know that.
The problem, really, though, Caroline, isn't the politicians, is it? It's the journalists that let them get away with it. There isn't a single high street shag rag that supports the democratic will of the British people. Not a single one.
But even, I mean, you look at the alternative news. I mean, most alternative news is also government controlled. And it's do you remember Lennon made a comment? He made a statement, didn't he? To be an effective government, you also have to be the controlled opposition. So that's why you have government agents, in UKIP and in all these different political parties, in these groups like, probably the chemical trails, the 5G. There's going to be government agents, plants, if you like, in all these groups. And that's why, it's best really in many ways to fly solo.
Do you think that the Brexit Party is more controlled opposition?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course.
You think that Farage?
Anyway, the parties. Have you not noticed that we've gone through decades and decades of 2 or 3 party system, and now a lot of people are beginning to realise that it's a veneer and actually it's all the same.
Duopolistic politics.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
So
Pepsi challenge. Pepsi challenge.
Groupings now in like hundreds and hundreds of different groups. So it's only going to be by the people uniting, and this is what we talked about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's only if the people unite and say, look, our children are now being conscripted into the EU army. If you've got children, 16, 15, 16, 17, 18, you're going to be surely thinking, my child could be conscripted into the EU army. Is that not enough of an incentive for the people who are watching tonight to say enough's enough? We'll tear off our badges and we'll get together? Because, I was on a round table, as you know, last night with Kerry Cassidy over in America and Deborah Tavares. And I think some of you, your listeners, might have heard of those people. And basically, it's all happening in America as well. They're messing around with the weather. And they can get snow. They can actually force snow on our lands. We could end up by having a cashless society. You've got the 5G, as you know. You've had somebody on about the 5G, and that basically is mind control. This is battlefield smart technology. And you've seen how so many of our military suffer from PTSD when they're on the battlefield, and that battlefield exposure might only be for a couple of days. But imagine that exposure for weeks, forever, in your street. How do you protect yourself when you're out and about?
Okay, now this is all so fantastical to the average Joe out there. Who is watching the BBC and thinks that Fiona Bruce is a lovely girl and Hugh Edwards looks like a lovely bloke, and they wouldn't be lying.
It's true. It is true. I mean, I'm part of a group who are based in Kensington and Chelsea, and they're all very, very, very nice people. But what we're talking about tonight, they would just quickly change the subject. They wouldn't believe what we're talking about. They'd say, well, let's see how May gets on in Parliament next week, and let's see what Corbyn does. And you see on Facebook all this distraction of sending cartoons round with Diane Abbott and about her maths abilities. But the real problem is the fact that it's our banksters that sit on both sides. Remember the Treaty of Versailles, the signing of the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. And it was very noticeable that you had one bankster brother on one side and you had one bankster brother on the other side. The same is happening with Brexit. It really didn't matter whether we voted for Brexit or not. The banksters will succeed whether we go or whether we stay. And, these trade deals are real. They are happening, and it won't make, it will be closer cooperation with the EU. We're not putting that blue water between ourselves and the EU, I'm afraid.
Do you really think that they will get away with it, so far as Brexit's concerned? Setting aside EU implosion as a let's assume that the EU could continue or whatever, which maybe it would anyway. But Brexit, can they get away with thwarting it?
Well, they're buying for they're definitely buying time. None of the political parties are really talking about. They're not talking about the common law. They're not talking about military unification. You mentioned the Brexit Party. Have they actually mentioned these? They've just talked about charging £50 for 2 nights accommodation and some food to do a march. That's not going to. What's that going to achieve exactly? It would be better to spend that £50 on buying the William Blackstone book and realising just how much our government is way off target with how they're supposed to treat us for a start.
Would it not be better to read up on William Blackstone and then get involved in the march as well?
Well, I don't think there's any need to spend the £50. But the thing is, what the government is planning for, I guess, is for trouble to kick off. I mean, I spoke at the DFLA march in October, and there was no doubt about it that the establishment were wanting some sort of problem to occur. And I was there. I was actually in the street when things got a little bit hairy for a little while, and the government and the police were basically quite heavy-handed, I thought. So it's not going to take much for all that to kick off if the police are given their orders. And remember, we've got the UK as a corporation, our police, courts, they're all corporations, so they're just all trying to shut us down, aren't they, and make money out of us at the same time.
Caroline is going all over the place here with all sorts of different snippets. But I want to keep to just this march for a second and party politics and the problems with party politics. And the march, as I understand it, in fairness to Leave Means Leave, the £50 is for to subsidise already sponsored accommodation over the course of 13 days, Caroline, and food. So, I mean, in fairness, I mean, that's maybe not so unfair, but your point is that they have an ulterior motive, is it? Leave means leave, and that they're not really doing it for purposes of Brexit. I'm not wanting to put words into your mouth. I don't know that I would agree with that, but is that what you believe?
Well, who's leading this march?
Nigel Farage, presumably.
Okay, so Nigel Farage is leading a march, and what has been broadcast in the press last month? What he's actually planning to do?
Just go at the beginning and kind of launch the march, get everybody going off, and then I don't know. He's going to go.
But he's planning the Brexit Party as well, isn't it? So
yeah,
it's
that's right.
On a road to produce a new political party.
Good PR for sure.
Yes, so basically it's quite neat, isn't it? You've got a database being produced.
Yeah.
You know, people
all that
are going to subscribe to this, and it's a database. And then, you know, would you like to donate? I think that's fair to say, isn't it, when you set up a political party? So we've got evidence now that the general election of 2015 was conducted unlawfully. So why would you want to set up a new political party knowing that the ballot box is rigged, or was rigged, and will also be rigged in the future unless there are big changes? We haven't got time for the start of a new political party. And, you know, as much as many Brexiteers like Nigel Farage, the 17.4 million people who voted to leave they didn't necessarily vote for Nigel Farage. So you're going to get these leave people spread around the country, but essentially the ballot box is rigged. And having stood for Parliament myself, you pay £500 for your deposit, which if you don't get your 5% of votes, you won't get that money back. You've got to spend, to do a decent election, you're probably having to spend £10,000. But, you know, essentially, why would you roll a dice looking for this, you know, like you have to do a 6, don't you, to start some of these games?
Yeah.
What happens if the dice is a loaded dice and you can never get that 6 because it's weighed on another side? It's just, what is the point? It's not going to be.
Okay, I want to come back to that, and I want to ask you about the rigged elections before we come back to that, actually, as a kind of a way through it. But first of all, just take a few comments. Stavros says, does Caroline know that the City of London cannot be part of the EU, as it is undemocratic, which is against the EU's own law? Thomas White, good night, everybody. And the answer to your question, Ollie, they are wasting time. They know only a small number of people will stand up against them. Everyone needs to go on strike before the deed is done. David Laddie, people fund a bloody court case. Simple. We're going to talk about that in a bit more detail in a sec, David. Jamie Mitchell, I don't understand that. Chris Ford, City of London is a separate state, as is Washington, D.C., and the Vatican. Anne Mace Pegg says, if you want an honest judge who is patriotic and knows our real law and constitution to appoint in the High Court, we can do that between us, all to fund it. Amanda Rolfson says, Amanda, I think I'm pronouncing your name better now. Now they are stating to have the privilege to meet Farage and have a meal. It will cost you 220 quid. And James Miller says he's not leading it all the way, Ollie, referring to Farage participation in the march itself. No, I think he's just kicking it off at the top or something, or whatever. And Amanda Momtazi says, agree with that. Lots who voted leave loathed Nigel Farage. Okay, we'll come back on to this UKIP and the Brexit Party kind of thing going on in a minute, Caroline, if we may, just briefly, because I'd like your take on that. But first of all, these rigged elections. So this is the 2017 election, yeah. The last general election.
No, 2015. The 2015. What
2015.
Happened?
2015, sorry. When 3.8 million voted for UKIP. More than voted for the SNP, I think. You're saying that there were rigged elections all over the country that should have gone to UKIP. Is that your point?
what happened, and I've got the paperwork here. But are you actually showing me on your show?
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah.
All right. So
Thank you.
basically, these are the printouts for the constituency I stood in, and basically under the Act, is it the People's Representation Act? One of the acts.
Right.
Basically, you have to have 6 voting categories, and each of those categories, only 3 are actually revealed in the constituencies. So it basically is classed as unlawful. We also have evidence in any event.
Well, hold on. Whoa. Just a sec. Sorry. Whoa. Hold on, Caroline. I didn't understand that.
Yes.
I didn't understand that.
Yes, I know this is why it's quite technical. That's why I've got a bundle that is being prepared for court, and I just need a lawyer. But it's like Anne was saying, well, who are we going to get as a lawyer? So you've got to have, like, for example, gosh, I need to put my glasses on here because the columns are so tiny.
Okay.
So you've got various acts which refer to electoral law, and you've got every constituency had an outcome that was unlawful. And let's have a look.
What?
So basically,
go on.
Have the number of papers that were sent out. You've got to, in one column, then you've got the cast ballot papers, then you've got the rejected ballot papers. You've got 6 categories like postal votes, and they all form a category. They're called vote categories. And only 3 columns have been filled in since and including the general election of 2015. Now, I don't want to get too technical because I've got experts they've been investigating this since the general election of 2015. They have advised UKIP, but they've not heard back from UKIP because it would obviously appear that UKIP could have got some seats. So this is why it becomes a little bit sensitive insofar as, we've just had a court case go through about the amount of money that was spent in one of the Kent constituencies. Nigel Farage's constituency would have been. Yeah. And we had that court case going through where more money was allegedly spent than was allowed, because there's rules for that as well. And so that came to nothing. And there were 32 other constituencies, including the one I stood in, that was similarly affected. So you've got those cases, and you just had only 1 out of 33 actually get taken to court. So what sort of justice system have we got?
That's very curious. So these are obviously very, very official kind of forms. If they're to do with filling out election results, official election results, and you would think that they would at least put a mark through to say there was a 0 or whatever in any box, in any of the boxes for each election. No, each 6 boxes should have some kind of a mark in it. No, be it a figure or a strike. I would have thought. I don't know. But that would be the logic.
Okay, but you've got a postal votes as well. So I mean, I was a counting agent for the referendum in my local constituency area, and I went into the council offices every day to see the postal votes being opened up. So they opened the envelopes and they're face down. I never saw them count them, even though I was a counting agent. We didn't get to see that. So what actually happened between 2014 and 2015, and we've got the evidence for this, and people have been threatened to be killed by this, which is why a wider audience needs to know this now for all our protection. Because if I'm not on this show in a week's time, you'll know. And I'm being very serious about this, Ollie. People have been threatened to be killed over this case. So you've got in between 2014, when UKIP did extremely well in the European elections and got 24 seats out of, I think, 73 seats for the UK, they sent out, and the documents are actually on the websites, and we've taken copies of them all. The meetings were held in all the constituency areas to make sure that that success did not happen for the general election of 2015. And that's all I can really say, Ollie, because if this case does go to court, if there is a lawyer watching, I should say a barrister watching rather than a lawyer, because I know somebody will nitpick and say, oh, that happens in America. But if there is a lawyer, we have got people who've prepared me a bundle, and this has just got to go to court.
It's an absolutely amazing story, Caroline.
I know.
Fascinated to see where that goes. But okay, so that's the deal. You need legal input into this. That's the bottom line. Because that's what I wanted to know so far as that particular question of the night to you is concerned. You're looking for legal representation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So if anybody knows anybody or can put out a word, please do, because that does look fascinating. No? James Miller, everything is rigged. So all politicians keep and secure their investments in the EU. Just one example is Theresa May's husband. John Upperdine, the Electoral Commission, even acted fraudulently. Amanda Rolfson says votes per MP 2017 UKIP 593,000, no MP. Green 525,000, Lib Dem 197,000. Labour 49,000, Conservatives 43,000, DB. Okay, basically it doesn't make sense, does it? No, it doesn't. David Laddie, only way forward is direct action. Caroline, okay, so your allegation really, in the light of that, which UKIP haven't responded to, discussing this electoral fraud that you're alleging, is that UKIP is complicit. That the Brexit part, now Nigel Farage wasn't that interested. There are all sorts of discrepancies with South Thanet, I think, is his contested election into MP, all that. As it was, I was under the impression that the Tory party overspent there and all that. And we know that there would have been a significant difference in the character of the Commons over the course of the last couple of years had we had maybe some representation for Brexit from parties that really did, seem to give a damn. But I get the inference is that they don't give a damn, and that it is a charade. Are you saying, do you truly believe that UKIP and the Brexit Party are not working in the? Well, do you think it is on purpose, or do you think that it is deliberate and that they are controlled opposition, the two of them, or do you think it's more complex than that, or what?
You know what? I think, Ollie, you once worked for the BBC, didn't you?
Yep.
Was it? Did you work for the BBC?
I did.
So you presumably, when you got your pay slip every month, you had to comply with what they wanted you to do. They wanted you to do, yeah? So you had to do your job the way they wanted you to do it, didn't you?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I did, which is why I no longer work for the BBC. But carry on.
But basically, the system isn't going to be changed by people who are accepting a pay slip from the European Parliament or from our Parliament, who's got they can only go so far. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of rhetoric, and if you know that the system is rigged, then it's like, I can stand here and promise you the earth, can't I, Ollie? I mean, let's be honest. What is a manifesto? The party writes it. And surely the whole idea of when Parliament was set up was in a locality, in the constituency, and which there'll shortly be 600 seats, not 650. But the people got together in the area and said, right, Ollie, we'll send you to Parliament because we think you're the best person to represent us. You didn't come to us, Ollie, with a set manifesto. We're telling you what we want you to do when you go to that building in London. That doesn't happen anymore. That hasn't happened for hundreds of years since we've had these.
Yeah, but okay. But UKIP and the Brexit Party specifically, because I mean, this does seem to be a big spanner in the works of UKIP getting any seats at the next general election, which could very possibly be caught up in a coalition off the back of that, in a kind of a DUP-style alliance or whatever. That I would have thought would be inevitable, actually. Such is the state of division in UK politics now. The fact that, as you say, they've not observed their mandates to respect the referendum result. So presumably the Tories and Labour would shed or will shed a considerable vote share at the next election. So where's that going to go? Now, it could have gone to UKIP, but now it's going to be split, isn't it? And I don't know. I do not know. But Nigel Farage is saying it's a Tommy Robinson issue or whatever. Is that smoke and mirrors? Are they just trying? Why what do we desperately need to see, do we not? From the point of view of pragmatism for Brexit, Gerard Batten and Nigel Farage lead that march together. If that happened, would our problems not be pretty much over? That people would think, okay, we've got some sort of a political home here, and we can pull Brexit out of the fire of brino.
What's to say we're going to have another general election?
Okay.
The Lisbon Treaty will not allow us to have another general election.
You're right.
So let's have a look at the parts of the Lisbon Treaty. Let's have a look at what it actually says.
Before we do, we will go straight into that. But before we do, please tell me how, with the current trajectory, it is possible for us still to be affected by the Lisbon Treaty.
Well, we've not cancelled it.
Mm-hmm.
We've not cancelled it at all. It's never been mentioned in Parliament. And it all fits that we are still part of the Lisbon Treaty. We haven't, the withdrawal agreement. So basically, we're looking at Brexit
exactly. That really is the question, isn't it? Because with no deal, with us going on WTO terms, rather, we would no longer be affected by the Lisbon Treaty in any way, shape, or form. However, under Theresa May's deal, is that different?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether the Lisbon Treaty will just continue anyway. But the thing is, it doesn't matter, because we are already part of the Lisbon Treaty is about giving our military to Brussels, which is what we're doing with or without any deal. And when we say there's no such thing as remember the e-petitions came back and the government said they had no intention of leaving without a deal. Liam Fox has already signed up to the trade deals. We've already signed up. The comprehensive economic trade deal has already been signed up in October 2016. That was debated in Parliament in February 2017 and June of last year. And that's when a Labour MP, Barry Gardner, was concerned about the unemployment that would follow from us signing the comprehensive Canadian trade deal. You see, when TTIP was mooted in 2014, 2015, before the general election then, we had millions of people taking to the streets protesting about TTIP. But what do you think they did? They already had this other agreement called the Canadian trade deal. So that was just basically smoke screen and mirrors then, because it was virtually identical to TTIP. You've got 42,000 American corporations with a subsidiary just over the border into Canada. So it's exactly the same thing. And what does it matter whether it's a Canadian corporation or an American corporation? They just thought, it's no better, it's no worse, it's going to be the same. So it's TTIP by the back door. So that means,
Yeah, but I don't understand how we're affected. We're not affected by Lisbon if we have no deal. Now, we're not going to get no deal, people. We're not going to get Brexit, full stop. I completely agree with Caroline on that. However, just to go through the,
Right, let's go through the points, shall we?
Yeah.
Can I just go through a few of them? Because
no, because first of all, I want to know if they're going to affect us. I know the points are horrid. The treaty is an absolute scam and a sham, and it's horrid. However, I'm just wondering, first of all, is it going to affect us under Theresa May's withdrawal deal?
Yes, of course it will. Of course it will. We signed the UN Migration Pact. Where did she mention that in the withdrawal agreement? It doesn't matter about protecting our borders.
It's not relevant to the withdrawal agreement, though. Strictly speaking, is it? Okay, I agree. Okay, all right. Carry on, please. Tell us what are the most concerning points.
Because there'll be some people that haven't believed so far. So basically, the long and the short of it is, we're going to be. It's going to be a new federal nation, the EU, and we're going to be part of it by 2022. Mm-hmm. And all member states must adopt the euro by 2022. Mm-hmm. We have got the EU Parliament and ECJ become supreme. Well, they are at the minute. Yeah. The UK will adopt 100% of whatever the unelected EU Commission and ECJ lays down without any means of abstention or veto. Yeah. negating the need for the UK to have the Lords or even the Commons as we know it today. So that's what I'm saying to you. By 2022, that's going to be the term. See, why she called a general election was because it was 2017. Yeah. So 5 years on from 2017 takes us to 2022 when all of this kicks in. So there's not good. Why would there be a general election? Because the Lisbon Treaty doesn't allow any more referendums. It hasn't allowed a referendum since 2017. So we should have left before 2017. We should have gone out, but we didn't. We should have just repealed the European Communities Act 1972. But yeah, we can tear these treaties up. I mean, I'd love to just be able to
We can. And the next government, by the way, can just tear it up. And then it's up to them whether or not they want to go up against our military. And whether or not our military has, by that point, been absorbed by the EU, which is what they're trying for. But they haven't got that yet, Caroline. And I would say it looks extremely difficult for them to be able to work that trick by 2022 to convince the British people that, yeah, you were right after all, parliamentarians. We don't care about democracy. We don't care. We're just stupid plebs. And we really don't, know best for all. I cannot see that transpiring and that acceptance, and basically a complete reversal of what the British people clearly want, which is to run away from this fascist club.
But we are already welded into the European Defence Fund, and we actually put in, even if we supposedly leave, we will still be putting more in.
Do you not think all this comes to a head?
The EU Defence Fund.
Do you not think, though, that all this comes to a head, that people will realise the difference once we go past this 29th of March deadline? People, I would have thought at that stage, would be poised at the next general election to make a considerable change to British parliamentary democracy, in inverted commas, whatever they want to call it today. You're saying that there's not going to be another election. Well, if that was the case, would the British people stomach that? I don't see that.
Well, I mean, on the round table discussion last night, we're sort of looking at it. When you talk to people from other countries who have done lots of interviews like I've done, and they're seeing it from an American perspective and a Canadian perspective and a Swedish perspective, then you realise the bigger picture is time is running out for the New World Order, as in they're accelerating now big time. And, the EU army is very real. If it comes into fruition by June, I mean, we've already had our British guys and girls landing in Bosnia last October with an EU insignia on their arms.
That's right. They had to take it off. They were told to take it off.
But what difference does that make?
They did. Yeah, they did. They wore it. They were wearing it.
So basically what Juncker has proposed to do is invest as an EU federal state as to increase our military budget tenfold. And so we're one of the biggest net contributors to the EU. We get nothing back now. I mean, that was in the Maggie Thatcher's days. I mean, we don't get very much back. I mean, it's our money anyway. And we've got this HS2. I mean, we haven't covered HS2. I mean, people don't know. I mean, I was interviewing a guy about HS2.
Whoa. No, never mind HS2. I want to ask you about 5G more than HS2, because that is a bit more concerning, is it not? We're underlining all the above and what have you. Just take a few comments. And then I want to ask you about 5G, and has Brexit just been a complete distraction, actually? Mick F. Keepers says, boycott the ballot box. It was Billy Connelly used to say, don't vote, it encourages them. David Laddie blocked him on the Thames as well then. Amanda Momtazi says, Ollie, if you can't accept it, you don't understand it. It's pretty much already happened. It would be too late for us not to stomach it, wouldn't it? Deed done. Amanda, devil's advocate here. That's my gig. Chris Ford, Lisbon is 99% the EU constitution. Jamie Mitchell, we have had to stomach a lot, Ollie. I want my bendy banana. Michelle Reed, no parliament can bind the next. Sean, is that correct, Caroline, in your estimation, according to our constitution, that the next parliament cannot bind the last?
That's right, as the rules stand today. So even if there was another general election in 2022 and people were so disgruntled by the Tories, they would make sure that Labour got in, and then we would be staying in. But we're staying in anyway. That's why we're saying, like the Treaty of Versailles, if you get over the concept that two warring nations went to war on the Treaty of Versailles, the banksters win, whichever side you're on. And this is what's going to happen. The Reds and the Blues and anybody else will always be ruled by the global elites. And this planet is ruled by 13 elitist families.
Okay, we've only got a few minutes left, and I do want to ask you about 5G, because yes, Mark Steele came on the show a week or so ago, and he was fantastic. It was very, very interesting indeed. He certainly got me thinking, and it just, I do wonder, I have to say, doing this show, I do sometimes feel, as though I'm misleading people a bit as well, because I don't believe we're going to get Brexit, certainly not with this Prime Minister and this government and this shower in Parliament. However, I do believe that we can fight for it, given enough pressure to these psychos and Jobsworths. But what he was saying was, well, hold on, you're kind of missing the point, really, because the thing is, Brexit is just a distraction. It is not the big issue that's going on in the UK at all. The big issue is 5G and these energy weapons, as he was describing them. I mean, is that the case? Is Brexit just a distraction? Is there a bigger agenda going on? And if so, what is it?
Yes, it is. It is because, as I said before, Facebook is awash from these supposed groups, campaign groups, about the personalities, whether it's Corbyn or Abbott or May or Jacob Rees-Mogg,
and also on a group level.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter.
Yeah, bugger the personalities. Let's just talk about policy, in my opinion.
We just want out. We just want to leave the EU behind. We want to be able to trade. I mean, they talk about the amount of trade we do with the EU, but people haven't mentioned. I've not heard a politician mention in recent years about the Rotterdam effect. Because what happens is the Rotterdam effect means like goods that come in from, say, Thailand and China, they go into Rotterdam first of all, and then they come into the UK. So actually, if you look on the internet, it's very misleading because it looks like we're buying stuff from the EU. It's not. It's come from Thailand or China.
Yeah, it's coming from Highway, this Chinese company that basically can be told by the dictator of China, the kind of bloke that's concentration camps and things like this. He says, I want to know everything about XYZ, and you've got to do it. And they have to do it by law, that company. But that is not anything like as big a problem as the kind of, I mean, Mark Steele left me kind of not being able to sleep that night. But
that's what 5G does to you, see? 5G will make you not sleep. Okay, and it'll make you compliant. Because
they're rolling this thing out. But, I mean, what evidence is there? What actual evidence is there that this is a dangerous weapon? And for the kind of argument to say that, never mind your local politics. You really need to be campaigning about this sort of thing.
I'll give you the evidence.
Go on.
The evidence, Lloyd's of London, they are there to insure uninsurable risks with the normal insurance market. Yeah. So Lloyd's these are wealthy individuals who basically can lose their shirt by insuring things like the Piper Alpha disaster.
I thought they went down, Lloyd's.
No, Lloyd's of London still exists.
Right.
Yeah?
Sorry, carry on. Okay.
And in 2015, Lloyd's of London refused to cover the impact of 5G. To me, I came from an insurance background. That speaks volumes. They're not prepared to cover it. That means there's going to be a lot of claims. And the council, you could put a claim into the council. they've never adhered to anything in the past. The courts don't adhere to anything. That's why it's got to be as unifying, because it's not gonna be joining political parties. That's not gonna do anything. We're all gonna be like in little groups and have these little sort of things that we feel more strongly about. I mean, I know people who've lost their children, and I mean lost. They've lost their children to vaccinations. I mean, the children's still around, but they've lost technically their children. I mean, that is very severe for those families as well. So everybody has different issues they want addressing, and all these issues could be addressed with a parliament or people in charge. It might not even be a parliament, but people in charge that actually care for our communities, because these politicians, they tell many lies, and they are not for the people. They are just going from this group to that group. They're just feathering their own nests. They'll talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And that's the problem with politics now. And it's not just in the UK, it's all throughout Europe. And, it has to be direct action some way, somehow. Everybody get a Sir William Blackstone book, and then you'll have your eyes opened. Who can stand as an MP? We've got lots of MPs in our parliament that shouldn't, and Lords, that should never even be there in the first place. Mm-hmm. But you see, you've got these vetting lists with, it was Serena Rothschild was the lady who actually chose the leader of the Tory party before she passed away. And how many people joined the Tory party thinking that they could pay their £20 or £30 to alter the leadership in that party? It wasn't going to make any difference. It was just a way of getting a few more quid in for the dinners. And but somebody mentioned about Philip May and Lockheed Martin. You see, you've got these organisations like Serco who are in charge of the asylum housing. And their Serco have been given this £2.9 billion project with a group called MEAS to produce asylum housing. I mean, how is that for people on the streets to see that asylum seekers are getting brand spanking new houses? Is that fair? This is where we've reached a tipping point now, haven't we? And that's why the people need educating. It's our government is not for us, and the sooner we wake up, realise that. It's been awake and aware in it, Ollie.
If there was a snap election, this week, would you bother voting at all? If every single party vote was available on your ballot paper, who would you put the cross by?
I wouldn't vote. It would be the first time I've not voted. Now I know the system is rigged, that it would just be crazy to do so. You have to go by your moral standing, don't you? If this is what you believe, the ballot box is rigged. I'm not playing their game. We're the people. We have to play our game. We run the game.
So what does that involve? What does that involve, Caroline? What do we do? Because you're not going to vote. You're not going to march. What do we do?
Well, I said, I've been to a couple of yellow vest events. And I was threatened.
So your opinion is it has to be word of mouth.
Yeah, definitely. Because Ollie, the rumours are, when I was on the round table last night, the Americans are believing that it's quite possible that the internet could go down after the end of March. So let's all be prepared. We now need to be, when we meet people on marches, we need to be prepared and not just consign their email addresses and their mobile numbers to our mobile phone. We need to actually start using pen and paper again.
I want to say a big thank you to my guest tonight, Caroline Stevens. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much indeed. Always
Thanks,
fascinating.
Ollie. Thanks to everybody at home for watching.
Always fascinating hearing what you have to say. Sue Dacey says, I would vote, even if I spoil the ballot paper. That's a good point, isn't it, Caroline? I tell you, it absolutely makes me so mad that they do not count spoilt ballots. But again, I mean, it would just be a wonderful way to evaluate true public opinion. No, I mean, it's, oh, sorry, totally.
They've got 3 blank columns. They're not registering 3 columns regarding the votings. So it's a waste of time.
Going to keep close tabs on what's going on with that story as much as I can anyway. Thank you, Caroline. That's a hell of a story.
All right. Take care. Bye then.
God bless you. Cheers. Cheers. Go and
Bless
feed
you
your
too.
family.
Bye, Ollie.
Cheers, Caroline.
Bye.
You've been checking out the Daily Brexit. I'm Olly Connelly. Back tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Robin Hawley from the Bruges Group is going to be popping in to have a chat about events. And thanks for getting involved, everyone. Loads of comments. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'll tell you, more people are actually watching this show these days. That's amazing. Despite Facebook. That's really cool. No thanks to Facebook's algorithm. But anyway, yeah, if you can support the show financially, please do. PayPal.me/Brexit. Only if you're flash, yeah? And that's great. I appreciate that. And thanks to everybody for sharing and all that. Yeah, wonderful. And I tell you, I really appreciate the interactivity with this show. Even if people don't bother calling it on Discord anymore, but in the comments, it's wonderful. And it means a lot. I appreciate it. I agree, really, that we do need to keep talking more than anything else, that we need to keep talking. Absolutely. Blimey. God bless you. And here's to us. And bugger plutocracy. Alrighty.